Thank you. So this is what we have here. So if you have your text, it'll be awesome if you can literally go to your text. And of course, I'm going to be wanting us to also look at some of our folders, and that will be your project files and folders. So literally, we're going to be working from page 139 of the text. So I'm going to open my project files, and this is what you would see, per your project files, and we're going to go to unit 2. And if you have any questions, you want me to go back one step or anything, please feel free to do that. Call my attention. So we are literally here. I already opened this somewhere, so I'm going to try to close all of this. Xcode, stop tasks, simulator, shutdown, quit simulator. Yeah, so all of this is closed. So this is where I'm coming from. I'm literally coming from the folder, and you go to the second folder, subfolder, go to build a question bot app, and then go into the subfolder, and then you have this, right? So if you open this, you're literally opening what will seem like an Xcode file. So when you open this, right, one of the things to look at is your navigator, your project navigator, which is this part of the your screen, that which will be the left side of my screen. There are a couple of files there, right? Most of these files are more like your Xcode files. So you're going to see Apple Delegate. So by the way, before I proceed, one of the things I would suggest to you, like, I know there are some of us that look at when you stumble on the Xcode screen, right? You're kind of unsettled because it almost seems like you don't know everything that's going on. So what I would advise is just focus on one part of what you're learning per time. You're not going to, especially if you're a new learner, you're not going to be able to understand what's going on everywhere. It's okay to just focus on lines of code, little bits of code, and all of that. So earlier I was talking about being able to introduce us to different types of right? Data structures, data types, and all of that. I already started doing that. Remember, when we started with character, we talked about integers, we talked about strings, and all of that. Those are different kinds of data types. But then you also have others, right? Which I kind of began to introduce last week, but had to slow down a little bit on trying to figure out who is. Sorry about that. So so if you look at this, right, this is what you call a struct, right? This is what we call structure. It's called structure. So there are two types of very common types that you're going to stumble on in Swift, right? One of them is struct, right? So you have the struct, and this is the name of the struct, which is my question answerer, open brackets and close brackets. Notice these two parentheses, right? Curly brackets. This can you see my cursor? Because I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. Oh, let me see. Okay, so this is what I was mentioning. Like, this is your struct, This is your struct, and then this is the name of the struct, and this is your open bracket, which is your open curly bracket, and this is the other bracket. So if you click here, right, say I click here, it's going to show you by the change of the color, right, where the counterpart curly brace is. So I click here, and then it shows me what the counterpart curly brace is. But inside this, right, notice something. Remember, we've been doing the other thing, right, for some time now, which is what you call your function. Remember, so your function, what you have here is your function name, and then remember this, you declare what's your data type, then would output a string. So I'm going to have an input that's a string, and I'm going to output a string. That's it. And this is the content of my function. That's literally what's going here. So just think of it as two types, your struct and your function laced in between it. That's what we have going on here. And the overall screen, as you can see, based on this is your Xcode, right? So you have a couple of files, and one of those files is your question answer file. And then there are a couple other files that do other things, right? One of those is, for example, the view controller. Literally, it's almost like what controls, that's where you write codes around what controls the user interface, right? Whenever you see view, most of what that is about is literally about. And then this is like the main folder or file, which is literally going to show you the boards, you know, this is it, but we're going to come back to that. But right now, our focus is going to be on this, right? So when you see this, we have a function that wants to receive some information and output some information. And we know that it wants to receive a string, and this string happens to be a question, right? And it wants to output some answer, right? That's a string, and it's going to return. So right here, we don't have anything for what we want inside here, but eventually it's going to return a question mark. So if I run this code, right, I'm going to get something like this. So that's what I have here. I have this on my screen. Now, this is what we have here is, think of it as a project that's already begun. And typically a lot of this, app development projects involves different teams working on different aspects of the code. So they've been able to develop your initial user interface, which is like what we did in the first project earlier. And then they have also been able to include, these icons, and then the app has been able to identify itself. It says, "Hello, human, I'm question bot. Ask me a question," right? Now, in the hood, right? In the hood, what we have under the screen, right? So this is my Swift UI, but under the hood, what I have is this, and is this function, and it's asking me to ask a question. So at the end of the day, right, it's going to return a question mark, because that's all we have in here, right? So if I enter the data, which is the question, let's say, what is your name? Boom. And then this guy responds with a question mark, because it hasn't been trained to know how to respond to all of this. So our part of the project, right, is to be able to teach this guy how to respond to questions intelligently. So it receives, if I ask a question, I want to be able to prime it to know what to respond and how to respond. right? So that's essentially what we are going to be doing. And being able to do that means somehow, remember your function is literally accepting some input data and outputting some data. They've been able to give us some information that we are receiving some string and outputting some string. So we need to be able to put in here, right, to do where you have to write what response we want the code to do. But first of all, one of those things we can actually start by simply just modifying this and saying, okay, if someone asks me whatever, just return, I can't understand you. Understand you, boom. And then I run this guy again. So I'm asking a question now. What is your name? And I ask, and then it says, I can't understand you. So it's beginning to make some kind of sense gradually. But then if we want this app to be able to, respond to several other questions and to also respond to them intelligently, we need to be able to create that body of code that would have to insert here. So one of those things is, notice what's happening. Each time we have to do something, we have to go run this guy, run the program again, and test. So we're constantly testing, we're constantly running, building the code and testing, right? That will take a whole lot of time, especially given that, it might just be 3 or 4 or 5 lines of code, might take us some time, especially when you are a beginner. So that's where the idea of using the playground now comes in, where we can go to the playground, play around with our code, make sure that it's working, and then import that code into your Xcode, and then you're creating your app that way. So it's an iterative process and that's why it's probably called playground, because that's where you can go make all your mistakes, build your code, put everything together, now come to Xcode, dump your code, run it once, and then build, and then you get your results. So your app development process, and notice here, right, you have different files. You can actually create more files that do different things and then connect them. And they might be individual files where you have tried to solve specific aspects of the problem, right? Come here, all you're doing here is running everything, building the code, and outputting the final result, which is what would therefore now take us back to where we started. So if I minimize this and I go back here where I have my folder, and then we go back, let's say, so we're still on build a, now there's this other file that is the playground. So I'm going to literally go open the playground. And this is, for those of you that have gone through this already, I'm going to skim through it, explain a few things, and then walk us through the process of actually getting the final code and embedding that code into your Xcode or in the hood of your Swift UI, and then having your code do something intelligent. So it says in this playground, you're going to work on a function to make question bot answer questions. You can build the brain of the app in a playground before adding it to the app. This lets you concentrate on the part you're working on right now. The brain, which is, we're literally trying to build intelligence into this app, right, is the function response. So we have decided, so what's been decided here is creators of this course, what they have decided to do is to create a function and call that function response to, right? and this is our input. In other words, we're going to ask a question of, obviously the type is a string. In other words, if you go type a number like 2 or 3, the code is going to, or rather Playground is going to know automatically, or Swift is going to know automatically, no, that's not a string, except you are able to somehow convert it to a string. So what it's expecting is literally some kind of a set of strings, and that's what it's expecting as an input and also as outputs. So we're already familiar with this data type, right? Where all we have is a func, which is the keyword for functions, the function name, and then this is where you have your inputs, and this arrow shows that our output is going to be a string, and then you return some kind of result. So in this case, the result is sorry. What was that? And then this is your function call. Remember, we talked about function call. Your function call is always going to be the name of your function, and then you're going to be able to give us some kind of input. Because notice in this place, you really didn't get the input. All you had was just a placeholder, which is the type, right? And once you do this, it's going to receive this result, and depending on what you have put, the operation that you want done here, it will now give you different responses to this. But at this point, all we have is just a shell of an answer. So this, if you run this right now, you really don't get much of a response, because it keeps giving you the same answer, right? If you ask how are you, what it does, keep your eyes to the right of this. So when you ask the first question, let me try to mark this out. Let me comment this out. So all of a sudden, see what's happening? If you ask that question, in other words, I'm feeding how are you into this point, it outputs this result for me. That's what it returns. If I feed in the second call, which is your function call, it feeds in the same result. In other words, all it's just doing is garbage in, garbage out. We haven't been able to build the intelligence we want into it as yet. So next thing, notice what's going on here, right? This is more like what you would call a method, right? Dot has preference. Dot has preference. Let me see if I can see anything here. Dot has preference. Prefix, sorry. Prefix. In Swift, let me do it in Swift. Let me see if I can find any information on this. Yeah. So notice, it's a function itself. Notice this, right? It's a function with a certain function name, right? This is your input. If you input a string, it's going to give you some kind of Boolean answer. In other words, it's going to say a yes or a no. That's what this is, right? So notice, I think the last class, right, when we talked about APIs, this is an example of a function, right? At least by just looking at this, you know what it does right now, right? And let me see, do we have any definition of so look at it. What is has prefix dot Swift? It returns a Boolean value that indicates whether a given string matches the beginning character of the receiver. Just pay attention, read that again to yourself, right? It returns a Boolean value. In other words, it returns a yes or a no, or true or false, right? That indicates whether a given string, right? Let's say a string matches the beginning character of the receiver. For you to understand what that means, right, we're going to go back to the example we're using here, right? So notice this. Swift programming, right, is a string. Once I include this function here, or what I might call a method, right, dot has prefix, and I enter in Swift, all it's just saying is this is what you use to check whether the first word the first string or character within a string, right? You're trying to check whether, so the first character of string here is Swift, right? So all I'm literally, when I say dot has prefix, I'm literally checking whether whatever I put in here is the first character, or rather the first string in here. I don't know if that makes sense. So for example, notice this, Swift programming dots has prefix, right? And I put open and close brackets, right? I'm putting in Swift here. It's going to give me true, right? Because all is trying to say, hey, this is a prefix. Think of when you're filling out a form, right? And then they said, give us a prefix like, are you a doctor, Mr. blah, blah, blah. So it's literally that first word, right? So that's exactly what's going on here. So for example, if I change this and I said something like programming, which is the second word instead of the first word, right? It's going to give me false. Notice what's going on this on the right is false. But if I change it back to Swift, it will say true, because the first string here, or what you might call the first word here, is Swift. That's literally what this function checks. So let me see, can I type here? I'm looking for somewhere I can type. Okay, doesn't seem like I can type. Okay, let me give you another example. Let's say University of South Carolina. So, and I say dot has prefix, boom, right? And then now it's asking me to enter what that prefix will be. So if I say university, city, right? Yeah. If I say university, it's supposed to say, I don't know why it's showing me this error. So if I say university, it's supposed to, because you have university here, it's actually supposed to say, yeah, okay, no, I can see what the problem is. I did not put my parentheses. So notice what it says, right? It says true, right? Because the first word here is university. That's literally what that function does. So it helps you check to see that the first word. So how is this helpful when I'm developing a program? Let's say I want the code to, anytime you see any sentence that starts with what, right? I need you to be able to answer in a specific way, right? If I say, what is your name, right? Or anything, whatever that starts with what, right? It has to answer in a specific way. It's not a lot, but those are the little things, and you can't know these things except you have run into them, right? So that's a typical example. But I'm wondering, does everyone understand what I just did, or do I need to recap in some other way? Let me see. Yeah, it's a string method. Exactly. Good. It's a string. It's literally a method. And in the next class, I haven't really gone deep, right, into talking about types and objects, and I kind of touched on it the last time, but bear with me. Next class, I'm going to be able to break down those things a little further, where we talk about properties. I know I started it last week, properties and methods. You know, properties are literally the attributes of an object or a type. And then you have like the methods, which is what it does, its behavior and all of that. So that's what we have here. So the exercises were required to amend the function and test below to respond to different first words. How about adding words for who, what, why, and how questions? So for example, I have my function here, right? We already know that your function starts here and ends where, starts there and starts here and ends where the yellow braces are. So this is what we have in here. Right? So all of these are within the function, right? So, but at the end of the day, we are trying to use an if else statement, right, to figure out something. So my question to this is, if question, right? So we're going to pass some kind of question to the app. So if that question dot has prefix, which is this method that behaves in this way that I just mentioned, hello. In other words, if I pass any question that has hello as the first word, then the system automatically answers true. And if it's true, then I'm going to return this. Else, I'm going to return something else, right? So this is an example. If question dot has prefix, and then I type hello, right? Then I'm going to return this. So before I go further, let's look at this first question, right? What we're doing in this first part is we're passing in this question, hello dear, right? So that's my function. I'm passing in hello dear. When hello dear encounters dot has prefix, right? Because that's the first word there is hello, this will be true. Therefore, it's going to return y hello there. That's why we have this y hello there. All right. For the second question that was passed in, which is your function call, the second function call, it's not where is not hello, right? Because we've run the first one, and once you encounter a yes, it doesn't keep running, right? So we're done with the first function call. We go to the second function call. It comes in here from here, goes in here as an input, begins to run. When it goes through here, right, goes through the first question, dot has prefix. It's not true because hello isn't the first word here, right? So it's false. So it doesn't print this, it doesn't return this. It goes to the next line. Else if, right? It asks the same question, is it dot has prefix, right? Where, so that's a true because the first word here is where, and then it prints out to the north. That's why we have to the north, and then it stops. It doesn't go further because it has accomplished its mission. Then we pass the last call, which is response to question, what is the capital of France? It does the same dance again, comes here, it will be a false because when I run this question, the first word is not hello. Then it goes to the next one, right? The first word is not where. Then it jumps, right? If else, it doesn't return this. And then finally, there is no condition here, right? It finally returns that really depends. And that's why we have that really depends. So 3 of those runs, that's how we got here. All right. So you can see how you can use like different kinds of methods, right? And these methods for example, the .has prefix, right, isn't something that we wrote ourselves. It's something that is originally in the standard library. All we just did was we just called it up. And I did show us here, you know, because it's part of the standard library, and that's why it's here. As you can see, it's actually an actual function, right? Just like we could write our own function, but it's been made available. All we needed to do was just call it, right? And we're able to use it. So that would be one of those. And then we go to the next. We wouldn't have time to go through everything, but I wanted to kind of show us some of this. And I highly, highly encourage you, if you haven't gone through this exercise, please go through it and go through it. I actually recommend going through it more than once or twice, because like it's going to give you a level of confidence that can help you begin to write lines of code for the hood of the app you're trying to build. And it will give you, it will show you all kinds of techniques of how you can. And then, for example, if you're trying to solve a problem on the first page, right, and it's so hard you can't get it, move to the next page, you're actually going to see some clue that can help you solve the previous page. So this is another page in this exercise. He said on the previous page, you wrote a function that matches the start of a string against a list of possibilities, right? The start of the string. However, it would only work when the strings were of the same case. So the point being made here is, hey, whatever we were doing here was actually case sensitive. What that means is, notice how notice how we said Swift programming dot has prefix, right? Swift gave us true. That's a lowercase. If I change this to a higher case, an uppercase, right? All of a sudden it's false and no longer true. Notice that, because the way that function is written, the first word of that string must, it is case sensitive, so it must align with the specific case within the string. So if I go back to my lower strings, all of a sudden this changes to true. So I'll go back here and see a couple. So these are a couple of examples where they use. Look at and this is how you test for equivalence, which is your equal. Your replacement for your equal sign, because like, remember I told us the last time, your equal sign is more like an assignment operator. Now this is your equality operator. What you do in mathematics that's your equal to, this is what this actually represents here. So here we are testing the proposition is where this string where equals to where. If you look at it, it's the same case, the same spelling, the same case, so we get it true. But here is the same spelling, but then there are different cases. You have a sentence case here, right? Therefore, it's false. In other words, this is not equivalent to this. Here, you have an uppercase, lowercase, it's false. So we can't use it. So if I was writing something, right, or developing an application where there was ever a risk that someone could actually type a question with a different case, then I need to figure out a way to be able to correct it, such that in whatever case they type in the instruction to the app will be able to understand it. So he said you could deal with this by listing every possible combination of cases. That's one way of doing it, right? When you're going to write that app, right? You notice how you do it for every possible way, you know, that problem would have been written, or any number of combinations of ways you can structure your question, right? But you don't want to do that, because that would just be, you're going to write so much code that wouldn't even make sense, and corrections, if you make mistakes, will be terrible, will be hard to pursue. So what's one strategy that we can use to fix this. So instead, it's better to change the case of the text before you try to match it using the lowercase method. Now, just like we have the has prefix method, this is another method we have, right? So what does this method do? If you have a string and you attach this method, you call this method, right? It can help you change that string, right? Whether it's a sentence string, upper string, it can help you change it into a lower case. Let me see if we can find anything online on this. We go, so I'm gonna say, I say Swifty here, interesting, Swift. Oops, no, stop. Yeah, lowercase. Look at it in the documentation, right? So boom. This is the function, right? I'm trying to see if there is a, so it's an instance method. They just gave a particular example. Let's cafe equals to barbecue cafe print cafe dot lowercase. So if I want to change this to this, look at what I get. When I print that, this is what I get, right? Because it's converted everything here into the lowercase. That's literally what it does. I was actually looking to see the full implementation of the code. Apparently, this is all we have here. But these are all things that are in the library. So if I want to change any word, right, that's not lowercase, I can just use dot lowercase to, and this underscores the reason why I said it's like, this is literally like speaking a foreign language, right? You can't, even in the English language, a vocabulary that you haven't encountered, you would not be able to use. So that's how it is with programming. The more you expose yourself to the language, you're going to begin to learn a whole lot of things. And as you enrich your vocabulary, that's how you're going to be able to have access to resources to be able to do things you want to do in the future, because you have all of this vocabulary in your toolbox. So today, I've been able to, for those of you that are not familiar with it, I know there are people here that are very familiar with things like this, but I'm beginning to enrich your vocabulary. And the more you open yourself, watch videos, look at people doing implementations, read, that's how you begin to gather all of that, what I would call the vocabulary, and that's how you are able to construct, the language. You're able to put together at some point. You become an excellent writer, like the writer of novels and works of fiction and all of that. So that's literally the corollary in programming. So where do we go from here? So this is, so let question, right? This is a constant. Let's say let question equals to this string, all uppercase. Then we say let lower question equals to, guess what? I'm now pulling this and then lower casing it, right? So essentially all I'm just saying is let lower question equals to whatever is here, right? Converted to the lowercase. So lowercase, and after I've done that, I'll now say lowercase dot has prefix. And then I'll ask the same question. I've gone back to where we are. So here, what you have is you have declared a constant, and that's your constant. And in the next step, all you have done is you have converted that constant to a lowercase, right? And after converting that string to a lowercase, the next thing you're doing is you're testing the proposition whether the first word, which has now been converted to a lowercase, is where. That's literally all that's there, right? So you've done that. So the next step is we want to implement it in that code that we had there, so that when I pass any string to it, irrespective of what case it is in, it will be able to convert it to lowercase. And then we can test the proposition whether the first word in that string is the word that we provided. So So that's why the exercise says rewrite the function below to work with any notice, because your case can come in any form, right? Whatever words you have or letters can, literally, and then mess up, and then the system wouldn't understand. So what we want to do is, irrespective of what we are fed, we're able to convert it to a lowercase. So that's my function, right? I'm passing in a string and I want to get a string back. So my question is, if question dot has prefix, right? I've already determined what question dot has prefix is, right? Which is converting whatever question it is to this. So I'm doing that and I'm checking whether hello, right? And then I'm returning Y. That's my return, which is, I could put anything here, right? It's going to be returned. Else, if hello doesn't work out, then I'm going to return this, right? So what is my question? My question is just hello. I could say something like hello, how oops, no. So hello, how are you, right? Same thing. Sorry. Right? So if I check that, my first word is hello, but notice that I'm passing a capital, a sentence case, right? Which is the first word is a capital letter. So when this comes here, what the system does is, first of all, it accepts question, right? And then it converts that question, right? But right now, we haven't been able to do that. So to do that, what should I do here? I will have to, because I'm trying to take this, I will say something like if lower question. Because what gives me a lower question is this, because this is what maps to the lower case, right? That's why I have this. And then I can do my thing. And then when I run it, I should be able to, I expect to be able to get some answer. Let me see. This really depends. So there's something not right here. And now you're welcome to, if lowercase dot, lowercase, lower question that has prefix, hello, return, response question, if lower question, lower. Does anyone see anything? Look. Around this, just a moment. Around this here. Just a minute. That's my practice file. Okay, this, let me see. Okay, this is where I ran that. Let me see. So can you see what's going on? I'm trying to figure out. Oh, okay, I can see what the issue was. So notice what happened, right? Here, because it's the same thing that we have here. I haven't declared this, so I start by let lower question equals to this. Does that make sense? Right? I get my question and I convert it to the lower case, right? To convert it to the, I get my question, I convert it to the lower case, and then I assign it this. Then I can call this dot has prefix, and then I get this. Just look at it. Do you understand? Do you have any questions? Does that make sense? So what we didn't have before was this. We did not have this before. So if you run it now, it wouldn't work because you have not declared, you have not made the question, you haven't converted to lowercase. So I'm saying let lowercase equals to that question dot lowercase. Does anyone have a question? Do you understand? Let me see the question area. Is it because line defines lower question as a let instead? Oh no. So it's supposed to be, you can use either of them, whether you can use var, you can use let, either way. The problem was just that we hadn't defined, because first of all, if we grab the question, right, we have to be able to use the dot lowercase, right, to convert it to lowercase first, before we can now do the dot prefix, has prefix. That's all that was going on there. I didn't define it. Must call lower, yeah. So yeah, so that's what's happening here. So if I throw in hello, right, and I run it here, the first thing that happens is it's converted to the lowercase, right, and stored as lower question. Now, lower question now is the lowercase version of question. And then I take that lowercase version and apply this method dot has prefix to it. And then I test that proposition, and then it's going to, because the answer is true, it will now return this result. Else this, but because it has already returned the result, it doesn't proceed, it stops there. So question, does anyone have a question? Because I don't want anyone to be confused. Yeah. So, and that's why I'm like, go try this. It's very straightforward once you get it, but it's very straightforward, but is one thing it's going to do is that it's going to create confidence for you. So there are all kinds of questions, as well as having general answers to who, what, where questions. You can include some special answers to specific questions, right? So same thing we did here. Let lower case question, right? We're just building on what we did before, right? We put in here. Somehow they decided to print it out, but you don't have to print this line out. Now, if lower question dot has prefix where, so anything I enter that starts with a where is going to give me this answer, right? So let's test the proposition. I want to see what we want to do in the next step. So it says the function doesn't work. The first if statement asks if the question starts with where, right? Which it does. This means the later statements never get tested. Change the function above so that you can get the answer in the cookie jar to the question where are the cookies, right? So that's what's here. This is me. This is the original question here. That was what I already did. So if lowercase question dot has prefix where, now if we test this, right, it's going to give us true, and then it prints to the not. What this question was saying is, no, we want to get an answer that says where are the cookies, right? We want to get a, read it, the first statement, right, asks if the question starts with where, which it does. Now, because it's where, all it does is just prints the first statement and stops. Now, but the writer of this is creating a hypothetical situation. He says this means that the later statements are not tested because the first is already true, right? So he's suggesting that we should change the function above so that you get the answer in the cookie jar to the question where are the cookies. And the only way you can achieve that, right, would be for the first question to be false, second question to be false, and then somehow you answer in the cookie jar would be the answer, right? So, which is, boom, just a minute. Which is what I did here. And the only way it was done is where to the north, where the cookies. If lowercase does this is where return to the north. Else, if lowercase is equals to where are the cookies, right? Return to the north. Just a minute. Where are the cookies? Where are the cookies? To the north. This means the latest are never tested. Where are the cookies? Return to the north. Else, if lowercase, where are the cookies? To the north. Return the cookie jar. Else, return above doesn't work. The first if statement asks if the question starts with where, which it does here. Let me see. I'm trying to see the difference between these two. Let's question case. This means the later statements are never tested. Change the function above so that you get the answer in the cookie jar. Okay, yeah, so where are the cookies? Yeah, I think I'm going to proceed with this, and when we take a break, I'll just look at it and then come back to this to show us, because I'm trying to find out what this is asking. It's not actually giving me the questions that what I'm looking for. So the next here, right, talks about there's something we call modulus, right? Literally what this does is, so this is another function that is called dot count, right? Let me see the questions. I just changed my first if to check. I just changed my first if to check for something different. Me too. Okay, I'll change the order so it looks for where are. Okay. But did you get it? Can someone type if you got it? Okay, awesome. You might actually just share your screen once we get here. I did some of that before we came here and actually got all of it. So here, all we are literally trying to do and is to use what we call the method function. Oh, sorry, count method, which is dot count, right? And all it does is it counts the number of characters in your string. So for example, A is just 1, right? If I say dot count, all it's doing is A dot count is going to give me 1. AB dot count is going to give me 2 because it's 2 characters. ABC dot count is going to give me 3. ABCD dot count is going to give me 4, right? So when you have dot count, when you have dot count, all you are literally doing is you're just counting the number of characters within that string. That's what dot count helps you do. So, but then notice it does something. You know how you, so let's say I said, I'm going to divide everything here, because what's happening here is I'm dividing this by 2. Notice dot count. My dot count is 1 divided by 2. AB dot count is 2 divided by 2. So 2 divided by 2, when you have your percent sign, all that percent sign is trying to do is actually to say, if I get a certain number and I divide it by another number that you provide, right, it's going to give me a value. But what I'm going to report is the remainder of that value. So modulus is about the remainder of a value. So if I give you 7% 2, 7% 2 is going to give me an answer like 7 divided by 2, which will be 3 remainder 1. I'm going to just report 1, right? So what we have, if you look to your right, as I count the number of these strings, right, using count, I count them and I divide them by 2, I'm going to get a certain number plus some kind of remainder. These are all the remainders that we have. So in a sense, it gives us the kind of, almost the same kind of results that your Boolean will give you, where it's giving you a 0 or a 1 or a 0 or a 1. That's literally what's going on here. So, and if you go through this exercise too, what you're going to find out is, and that's why I'm like, I'd rather we just go through the exercise. If you go through the exercise, you're also going to see specific implementations of that. Look at this. For example, it's used here. So let's say I have a question dot count. Here, this is my question, right? So I'm going to count how many characters are there, and then I divide it by through whatever remainder I have, right, is what is going to help, is going to be a value that I get that is going to feed into my conditional statement. Again, try to go through this, and if possible, at some point, I might be a good idea to make a video of this or something. But at the same time, I just don't want to. I need us to actually wrestle with this, because if you wrestle with it, that's actually how you're going to get the results. So this is where it has you walk through all of that process. But at the end of the day, this is, and depending on what you do, right, everybody is not going to get the same result because it depends on what you're writing. But just a minute, let me get the piece of code I got from TV. Just a minute. Where's notes? Okay, let me go to this. Notes. Okay. So eventually, this is what I got from there. Command A. So this is the piece of code, right? So if you go through that, at the end of the day, you end up with something like this. And then that's where we go back to go open. No. I'm looking for my file. So we go back here to go open our question bots, which is what we had before, right? And then in trying to copy, but I mean, I hope you see why it's important to work with Playground, right? Because what you're doing in Playground is you're literally going to walk through a couple of lines of code to be able to solve a specific problem you have. And then what you're playing with is all of the data types, the data, it could be strings, integers, and all of that. And then you have your functions, and in some cases, you're going to have your struct, or you're going to have your class, and you're going to be able to feed in all of that, and you get your results without going around being on Xcode, compiling over and over again. But what I've done is I've gone there, I've gotten my code. Let me just kind of paste it here first and see. So that's the code, right? That I got. But then one way to paste this would be, let me just delete this. You come in here, click here, right? Let's say we come here. So you have your function, and then you delete all of this. Remember, this cursor, right, is for strut. So what you're trying to do here is to paste just your function. That's what you want to paste here. So you have your strut. What we wrestled with down in Playground was just our function, and you want to come paste your function here, right? Let me see, have we missed anything? So I didn't have time to, or rather, I'm not sure it's actually time. But if you look at this, this is literally what we started with. The let lowercase question equals to question. Now, if the lowercase question is equivalent to hello dear, then you return this. Else, if the lowercase question is equivalent to where are the cookies, then you return this. Else, if you return this. Else, then you said let this default equals to, and this is where we use our modulus, right? Question dots count, where if I pass a specific question, you know, and then I divide it by say 3, some kind, whatever reminder I get there is what I'm going to use to test these propositions, right? So I run this. Let me see. We run this now, and then what do we have? So this is what we have. So if I asked a question, because what we have now is the code is literally here. So what kind of question can I ask? How are you doing? That really depends. Now, when you do this, you want to also go look at your logic and see what it's responding to and why it's responding to all of that, right? But it just gives you, gives you some idea of how you create this logic, right? That's why, again, I said it's very important that you need to sit down yourself and go through it. Again, if you hit a snag, feel free to come to me and we can work together to, clear it up. And even if it's something I'm unable to, I can always help engage resources outside, my internal circle to be able to help. So what were some of the questions? Let's ask some other questions. Does anyone have some of those questions? Just ask some of those questions. You have any of those questions? Or let me just go. Code line. Playground. Let me see some of the questions we had. Let me just ask some of these questions and see the outputs we get. So these are some of the questions we had here. Where are the cookies? Can I have a cookie? Where are the cookies? Where are the cookies? Right? In the cookie jar, can I have a cookie? Can I have a cookie? I'm not sure. I understand me. We must have written understand you somewhere. but all of that we can correct and all of that. But I mean, generally, that's how this is. So I can see some things in the chat, right? So like Tammy mentioned, a lot of those things are going to be in Unit 3, but this is just to help us begin to make some connection as to how Swift and Swift UI work together. So in chapter 3, I actually try to, begin to open us up to a whole lot of other things. But for now, right, at a high level, is there anybody that has a question? Does anyone have a question? Questions? Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so if there are no questions, let me see. I have to, at some point, I've got fast data and processing data, so can be until you understand data. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to stop here, and then I would ask that we have like a 5 minutes break. 5 minutes break, and then we can, or let's just come back at 7:20, right? And then we can start Unit 3 and start working on Unit 3 and see how far we go with Unit 3 today. And I don't necessarily have to go deep. I might just touch a couple of things all over the place, at least to give you a heads up and preparation. And then you can go do your reading, do the exercises, and then we can come back next week and actually zero in on it. So thank you. A bit of as you can see, this requires you sitting down and going through these codes. And as you would have seen, there are a couple of things that are in Unit 3 that are embedded here, but we're going to get a better grasp of it when we get to Unit 3. All right, people, I'll see you in a few.